You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello, once again, to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And today we're going to cover an interesting UFO sighting, not just by one, not two, not 20 people, but many, many people that happened in the past in February 25th of 1942 in Los Angeles. It's actually a pretty famous story that really doesn't have an absolute resolution, other than the military and the government saying, oh, it's a weather balloon. That was their ultimate solution to what happened. But we'll get into the details of that too.
They've said that more than once. It's always a weather balloon, isn't it?
It is, and there's reasons why I laugh wholeheartedly at that reasoning. When you hear the story, you're going to be like, this is no weather balloon, because it just wouldn't have happened.
Right, not with this story.
Nope. Okay, so we'll get going here. It was early morning of February 25th, 1942. A large, unidentified object hovered over a Pearl Harbor-rattled Los Angeles, while sirens blared and searchlights pierced the sky. Now, 1,400 anti-aircraft shells were pumped into the air as Angelinos cowered and marveled. It was huge, it was enormous, one female air warden allegedly claimed, and it was practically right over my house. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. But that wasn't all. Some Angelinos actually claimed there were more strange objects in the sky that night, namely dozens of airplanes, or was it flying saucers, that had come to destroy LA. They wouldn't be the first ones to probably want to destroy LA.
Probably not.
A lot of people want to destroy LA. The obvious thought was that these were Japanese bombers come to attack the United States. UFO expert Bill Burns, publisher of UFO magazine, told PR Newswire in 2011, but it wasn't. They were flying too high. And the astounding thing was not one artillery shell could hit the craft out of all the hundreds of shells that were fired. Now, people outside that night swore that it was neither a plane nor a balloon. It was a UFO.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action.
It floated, it glided, and to this day, nobody can explain what the craft was. Why our anti-aircraft guns couldn't hit it? It's a mystery that's never been totally resolved. Now, that night, befuddled officials would only help the urban legend grow, because many officials now believe 2 weather balloons released by the 203rd Coast Artillery Regiment from the Douglas Aircraft Plant in Santa Monica and the Sawtelle Veterans Hospital in Westwood may be responsible for the ensuing chaos. Jittery soldiers already on high alert in the early days of World War II panicked, and the rest is conspiracy theory history. Now, all of the pieces were in place, according to the LA Times, for the confused action known as the Battle of Los Angeles. People outside that night swore that it was neither a plane nor a balloon. The city was high on alert following the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Rumors of an imminent Japanese invasion were constant. Now, according to Terence Sword, author of The Battle of Los Angeles 1942, The Mystery Air Raid, during one incident, the Navy reportedly received a tip that there were more than 30 enemy ships off the coast. Now, Army pilots took off to find them, only to discover they were nothing more than fishing boats. Now, Southern California's worst fears were realized on the night of February 23, 1942, and the LA Times described the scene 20 years later.
As President Roosevelt warned a nationwide radio audience that the oceans have become endless battlefields on which we are constantly being challenged by our enemies, a Japanese submarine, I-17, surfaced offshore at Elwood near Santa Barbara and pumped 30 rounds of 5.5-inch shells at oil installations. Minor damage was done to piers and oil wells, but the raider missed a gasoline plant, apparently its actual target. A panicked Los Angeles awoke on February 24th to photos of the damage from the shells and news that the enemy submarine was nowhere to be found. That evening, the Navy received word of another imminent attack. In the early morning hours of February 25th, air raid defense radar tracked an unidentified object approximately 100 miles from LA. At 2:25 a.m., air raid sirens blasted. Shortly after, radio silence was ordered and searchlights began to pierce the sky. A little after 3 a.m., a balloon-like object appeared in the sky over Culver City and Santa Monica, the same one that people would later call UFOs or mysterious aircraft. And considering that time, that would have scared me too.
Oh, I'm sure, because especially you're on the brink of war, you're paranoid.
Oh,
anyway.
Yeah,
So any large unknown object in the sky above your city is going to freak a lot of people out.
I would have been freaked out because it was wartime.
Yeah.
And we were on alert. You hear those sirens going off.
Yep. You think, oh, this is it, or we're going to be bombed.
Right. We all got out and watched it, one retired officer told Huelhauser decades later. We saw something, but it was nothing definite. Seemed to be something circling slowly around. I was standing next to my commanding officer, and he said, "It looks like an airplane to me."
Minutes later, the shelling began as gunners shot around 1,400 rounds of artillery into the sky. LA citizens believed the end was near. Around 12,000 volunteer air raid wardens took their positions, patrolling the street, making sure no light was visible and no citizens were outside, as shells fell from the sky and rained down on LA. I'll never forget that night, Pasadena local Gene Valentine told the LA Times, because I was in Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital having my first child. All the new mothers felt helpless, as I did amid all the sirens and searchlights. So in the pitch-black halls, the nurses came along, handing out babies to anxious mothers. I'll never know to this day if I had the right one, but it doesn't matter. Wasn't that a humane and thoughtful thing for the maternity nurses to do?
What does she mean it doesn't matter? Shouldn't she take home her with the right kid?
I know. If I was her kid, I'd be like, what do you mean it doesn't matter, Mom? Thanks. So you're like, I could have real parents out there. It's like Annie all over again.
Yeah, get your DNA done.
Yeah. As explosions ripped the night, folks peeped out of their windows to look at the sky. People claimed to see many different things. A blimp, more than 50 planes, nothing much. Whatever was actually in the sky, most of the danger lay on the ground below. We ducked for shelter in the hulls of ships, shipyard worker James Mason recalled. Under them, anywhere we could get. We sure got out of the way in a hurry. By 8 the next morning, 3 of my buddies had picked up a tin hat full of shrapnel. By the time the graveyard shift clocked out, everyone went home with their pockets loaded. After almost an hour, the great Los Angeles air raid was over. Frightened residents eagerly reached for their morning paper.
Roaring out of a brilliant moonlight western sky, the LA Times reported foreign aircraft flying both large formations and singly flew over Southern California early today and drew heavy barrages of anti-aircraft fire, the first ever to sound over United States continental soil against an enemy invader. The LA Times also published a heavily doctored photo of searchlights shining on the unidentified object flying over the city. The photo was picked up all over the country and eventually made its way into Life magazine. According to the Los Angeles Examiner, shrapnel-strewn areas took on the appearance of a huge Easter egg hunt. Youngsters and grown-ups alike scrambled through the streets and vacant lots, picking up and proudly comparing chunks of shrapnel fragments. We all got out and watched it. We all saw something, but it was nothing definite. It seemed to be something circling slowly around. I was standing next to my commanding officer, and he said, "It looks like an airplane to me."
A retired officer in an interview with Huell-Hauser, the appearance of real battle and opposing narratives provided by the Army and Navy only made matters worse. Now, on February 27th, the LA Times printed an editorial stating, "This is no time for squabbling." In it, they wrote, "What baffled historians may later describe as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid Mystery showed some signs yesterday of developing into a squabble between the Army and the Navy over the question whether there actually were any enemy planes, unidentified planes, or planes of any kind over this area between 2 o'clock and daylight Wednesday morning."
Yeah, but they were quick to shoot, weren't they?
They were. Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson and the Army Chief of Staff initially stated there were 15 enemy aircraft to spy on LA. However, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox claimed it was simply a false alarm caused by jittery nerves, and thus the overeager Army's fault. In retaliation, the Army doubled down on their assessment, according to the LA Times, all of which, so far it may express interdepartmental feelings, seems the Times to the last degree unfortunate and dangerous. Correctly or otherwise, this is supposed to exist a certain amount of rivalry and jealousy between our two chief armed services. There's never been a time in our history when complete harmony between the United States Army and Navy was so important as now. No good purpose can be served by hasty and perhaps ill-informed outgivings from either side, which, even unintentionally, reflect on the ability of the other.
There may also have been a cover-up to save officials from the embarrassment of fighting a weather balloon. "I was summoned," one soldier recalled. "I was told to keep my mouth shut and that there had been 7 Japanese planes up there. I was also told that if I repeated my story about shooting at a balloon and not enemy planes, I would be put behind bars." When it became clear that the battle had probably been much ado about nothing, there was a furious backlash. According to LA Times, Representative Leland Ford called for investigations, asking if the battle had been a practice raid or a raid to throw a scare into 2 million people, or a mistaken identity raid, or a raid to take away Southern California's industries. Up to 6 people died that morning, some in car accidents and others due to heart attacks. Many volunteer wardens were also injured by falling shells, and numerous Japanese Americans were arrested for signaling to the invaders. Why were they signaling to them?
They were just accused of.
Accused, yeah, I would think they were just accused.
Yep. The mystery of what actually happened on February 25th would linger for decades. Then in 1975, aviation expert and then LA Times aerospace editor Marvin Miles wrote a memo explaining what he believed occurred that was published in the Times. As a survivor of both the Great Air Raid and the dangers of penetrating the blackouts to reach the Times sitting room that night, may I call your attention to Volume 1 of the Army Air Forces in World War II, an official history which devotes some 3 pages to the incident in which 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition were shot, no bombs dropped, and no plane shot down. In sum, the history points out, 1, that the Japanese at war's end said that they sent no planes over the area. 2, that much of the confusion came from shell bursts caught by searchlight beams, which themselves were mistaken for enemy planes, and 3, that a careful study of evidence suggests that meteorological balloons known to have been released over Los Angeles may well have caused the initial alarm. A theory supported by the fact that anti-aircraft artillery units were officially criticized for having wasted ammunition on targets which moved too slowly to be planes.
But this rational explanation did not stop a new otherworldly theory from taking hold. As early as the 1970s, the idea that an extraterrestrial invasion was responsible for setting off the Battle of Los Angeles began to circulate in the UFO community. Many used the LA Times doctored photo as proof, along with the fact that the floating object had appeared immune to gunfire. According to Skeptoid podcast host Brian Dunning, the conspiracy theories really ramped up in 1987 when the now discredited Majestic 12 documents were released. One of them appeared to have been an official government document. The Marshall Roosevelt memo, March 5, 1942, claimed that 2 alien aircraft had been recovered after the battle. This headquarters has come to a determination that the mystery airplanes are not in fact earthly, and according to secret intelligence sources, they are all in probability of interplanetary origin.
This fake memo jump-started the belief of an alien visitation to wartime Los Angeles that has never abated. For more than 40 years, Dunning wrote in his blog, not a single person associated with the Battle of Los Angeles entertained any thoughts about extraterrestrial spacecraft or aliens. According to all available evidence, at least when you discard the hoaxed evidence, the alien spacecraft angle is purely a post hoc invention by modern promoters of UFO mythology. There is no doubt people saw unidentified objects that night. There's a very slight chance that a Japanese submarine could have been released a seaplane over LA. But the truth behind the Battle of Los Angeles is probably more about human fallibility, bad intel, errant weather balloons, and poor training than anything else. However, the records are so muddled that the true story of the Great Air Raid will forever be fodder for those with conspiratorial minds. And I think we have 6 things about the battle that most people don't know. Do you want to go ahead and read some of those?
Sure. There is one thing, though, I'd like to say about it. There were 6 deaths that were caused that day due to car accidents and also heart attacks, and also some of the shrapnel, the fragrance that fell down. I wonder if the family of those people that died didn't sue the government for what happened, because they were quick to shoot without even.
It was wartime, so it's all for the wartime. It was against the evil enemy of the Japanese, so they probably would wash it away as far as patriotism. They died, and we're trying to battle the enemy, and they can't really blame them, because if it was Japanese
but
in
causing
origin,
an accident
but you're battling
getting
the enemy.
a heart attack
But they did say they were trying to keep a lot of people indoors, so some people refused to go indoors. So
either that or they couldn't get away easily.
Yeah, but if you have the Army and the Navy shooting at something in the sky that they consider an enemy craft of some kind, why in the world, as a civilian, would you want to run out in the middle of it and look up?
Well, what I mean is these people probably couldn't get away that easily. Maybe they were on their way home, and maybe they were just too late. But
it's hard to tell.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the arrival of the awesome new alien invasion film Battle Los Angeles coming in 2 weeks.
I think it's already been out.
That's already been out in 2012, right? So anyway, it's worth noting that that today is I guess back then it was in 2012 it was the 69th anniversary of the real Battle of Los Angeles. So also known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, the event took place in the wee hours of February 25th, 1942, as we mentioned, just over 3 months after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and brought the United States into World War II.
Okay, now you have some other facts that people may not know about, correct, as far as this particular incident?
That's correct. While there's no conclusive proof that the Japanese or anyone else attacked Los Angeles on February 25th, 1942, Santa Barbara, California, just 2 hours up the road, was the subject of a Japanese raid just 2 days earlier. A Japanese sub prowling the waters off the California coast fired several shells at targets in the area, causing minimal damage, but initiating the invasion scare that followed.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the and actually they were wondering what that thing actually was. So the panic in Los Angeles was caused when a number of witnesses reportedly sighted a large round object in the skies over Culver City and Santa Monica, as we mentioned, both neighborhoods on the west side of the town and closer to the Pacific Ocean. The object was barraged with more than 1,400 shells from aircraft guns with no visible effect until it eventually drifted leisurely south toward Long Beach and vanished from the view. Most reports described it as a pale orange in color and glowing.
That's interesting.
Which doesn't sound like
No,
a regular
and
aircraft to me.
It's funny because the article doesn't mention anything about being pale orange and glowing, nor does it mention anything about it just drifted off out of view.
No, it doesn't
nobody
mention
saw it
anything
again.
like that.
Now, I know there were some casualties. As you mentioned before, they did claim 6 lives, 3 civilians killed in directly friendly fire, with 3 others suffering heart attacks during the hour-long siege. So that's 3 civilians. So that could be 3 people wandering, trying to get out,
Yeah,
and the other 3 heart attacks just because of the ordeal.
yeah,
and
frightened them, yeah.
And the whole experience lasted an hour, and a number of buildings were also damaged by our own anti-aircraft guns. So having to shoot at them and damage our own buildings, that probably caused enough panic with enough people.
I'm sure,
So that would explain the heart attacks.
yes.
There are other theories as well. Shortly after the alarm, the speculation ran rampant as to the cause. Some people suggested that the Japanese were launching planes from a secret base in Mexico, while others theorized that they were developed a submarine capable of carrying aircraft. Now, it was even suggested that the event had been staged in order to convince defense companies located near the coast to move their operations further inland.
Those are just theories, though. Nobody really
exactly.
has any definite, yeah. Now, they mentioned also that the military could not get its story straight. While the Army's Western Defense Command in San Francisco initially attributed the incident to unidentified planes over Southern California, the Secretary of the Navy said that the event was the result of war nerves and a false alarm, which that makes sense to me, actually. It wasn't until 1983, more than 40 years later, that the military concluded that the incident was possibly caused by a drifting weather balloon.
Ah, the weather balloon.
Of course, the weather balloon. That's so old, that argument.
It is. The mystery still remains, although many eyewitnesses reported seeing a single large unidentified object over LA. A number of others also reported spotting anywhere from 25 to 200 planes swarming over the metropolitan area. But not a single bomb was dropped, and not a single enemy fighter was brought down. The round object itself was never recovered or seen again. Despite the official explanation, no real answer to what or who started the Battle of Los Angeles has ever been found. Now, what do you think? What do you think of this particular? What do you think? Do you think it was an enemy craft of some kind?
No. If it was interplanetary, here's what my theory is, if we're going to believe actually what we've heard before about the UFO activity in the 40s and 50s. Now, we've had Glenn Steckling on our show a few times.
Yep.
And his father worked for George Adamski, and they were both very involved in that field. And George Adamski started taking pictures starting in the late 1940s all the way through the 50s before he actually started writing his books and talking about it.
A lot of pictures.
I'm wondering why this influx of activity is being talked about and recorded starting in the 40s all the way through the 50s. And I'm wondering if it's because America was at war, they invented the atomic bomb, it's almost as if you're looking into the mind of somebody interplanetary, they're wondering what's going on here, what's happening with the atmosphere.
I would think if there ever was a time for an alien race to want to visit us,
yes,
and maybe take notice, is if we're going to war, because then you're starting to kill each other. You're using weapons that you've designed, maybe technology that's new. Mm-hmm. And I could see alien race who's maybe keeping an eye on this planet, but not necessarily interfering, is going, oh, what's going on there? Because you always hear about UFOs being sighted around nuclear power plants. You still do.
Yeah.
And different large
Definitely.
cities, different military bases, you always hear about UFOs being sighted close by. Because, again, I think they're keeping an eye on the technology. They're keeping an eye on what's going on. The atomic bomb, like you mentioned.
Right.
So I wouldn't doubt it if this craft, because they're probably knowing what the Japanese are doing. It's, Pearl Harbor happened. So people are paranoid. But I could see an alien craft keeping an eye on things all over the world. And maybe this is sort of a, let's check out what's going on over here.
Actually, when we have Glenn next time on the show,
Ask him about this.
I'm going to ask
topic.
him about this, if he heard any stories about it when he was growing up.
Yeah, or if it ever came up in question, if Adamski ever asked them, like, this particular incident, was there a reason this happened?
That would have
Because I would ask those questions. Like, do you know anything about that? If so, do you know why it happened?
Right, because they're all from Southern California, and they must have known all about this. And well, Glenn, if you're listening, we're going to talk to you about this.
There you go.
And also, here's a theory about enemy airplanes and thinking that it's work, that there's an enemy spy. What actual enemy would actually go over a crowded city during wartime unless they were nuts?
Well, and not drop anything.
And not drop
Why
anything.
did you not drop bombs?
Yeah.
And if there were really that many planes flying around, not one plane got shot down, not one bomb dropped. So if they didn't actually do anything, and you start shooting. So we just start shooting. That's us. Let's just shoot anything till it comes down.
Well, and especially during that tense time.
And I can imagine you'd shoot it, because if it's enemy wartime, you don't know if it isn't something from the Japanese off the coast.
There was a lot of
You're
paranoia.
going to want to shoot and ask
Right.
questions later, right? During this time?
During that time, yeah.
But it's fascinating that they didn't recover anything that we know of.
Right.
Although you heard that one of the theories that it was 2 alien aircrafts up there. Who's to say we didn't apprehend them later? But the actual report is they didn't drop a bomb. There was nothing on the ground that anybody saw.
And the description sounds so much like so many UFO sightings later during that period. Orange, glowing, round. It sounds
Cigar
like so
shaped
many.
almost, it sounds like.
Yes. And
But it said round though, right? It
round.
said round.
So it must have been what they call a scout ship.
Yep.
Right, rather than the cigar ship. Because
Exactly.
apparently the cigar ship, they've seen it too, but they see a lot of round ships nearby it.
Well, they did say this was massive. This was
Massive.
a massive sized ship.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that it hovered and lasted an hour, if it stayed there for an hour and they shot at it and nothing came down, well, we know it's not a weather balloon. That's the dumbest excuse I've ever heard in my life.
And if they came that close, and if it was somebody interplanetary, I can't read the interplanetary mind because I don't know what these people were thinking. But if it was interplanetary and they came that close, I wonder what they must have really needed to come that close for some reason.
If you visited, you hovered, and all they could do was start shooting at you for an hour, you were like, bye, we're out of here.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, they had the bravery to come that close, and it must have been for a very good reason that they came that close.
It could have been. But I'm still wondering about, there's no way a weather balloon could have survived that. If they shot that much into the air and nothing fell down and nothing was recovered like a weather balloon, that weather balloon thinks, oh, well, it works for Roswell. Although Roswell, I believe, was later.
Right.
They used it again in Roswell. So apparently the weather balloon excuse is probably pretty popular.
Seems to work.
Yeah. I just don't buy it.
I have a feeling a lot of people back then didn't buy it, but
And
nobody wants to argue with the government.
And how come, and I'm curious about this because I looked at a lot of photographs and they were mostly that doctored LA Times picture.
Sure.
But how come nobody else was able to take a single photograph separate from the LA Times?
Well,
I know it was 2:30 in the morning.
okay.
It was dark.
Okay, think about it this way. People didn't take many pictures back then. And if you're told to stay inside, it's dark, it's 2 a.m., you probably aren't able to get a whole lot of film unless you go outside.
But this is Hollywood.
That's true.
This is Los Angeles.
That's true.
This is during Hollywood, glamour period where a lot of people were into photography. They were into all that kind of stuff.
And they were able to have their photography tricks. They were able to do it.
But it's just interesting that nobody else or nobody's come forward with a bunch of photographs. It'd be interesting to see if anybody actually ever did take photographs.
And kept it a secret and didn't expose them.
But would the military have seized them if they saw somebody taking a picture?
Well, that's what I was thinking. Maybe they took it. Maybe they kept it in the family photo albums and they didn't turn it in because they know they never see it again.
Or the military seized their cameras and said, you can't take pictures of this. Is top secret.
That could have been another factor too.
It's hard to say. It's just weird that there hasn't been any other pictures besides this LA Times picture.
Compared to today, something happens, there's pictures all over the place.
Especially if it's in Los Angeles. If that many people were involved, their families would have stories, their grandpa would have stories, grandma had stories.
How many people are living still from that time that were old enough to really...
You have to be pretty young. I mean, even the servicemen then were probably young, 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be a kid to have watched it, witnessed it, and maybe heard family members. Those people would be old now that you would have to ask about it. And I can see a kid's view getting a little warped.
I would love a witness. If anybody here knows somebody who's a witness to the Battle of Los Angeles, then I would love to hear about it. And please tell them about our podcast, and we would love to invite them to talk about it.
Absolutely. Now, this particular article, by the way, was by Hadley Mears. It's a good article. I just think it really covered the story as far as details and
that was a very good article.
But yeah, I'd be really curious to hear from somebody who was a kid then who saw it, but they'd be in bed, right? 2:30 in the morning. Most kids would just be in bed. So we got to remember that too. At 2:30 in the morning, it isn't like it happened in the middle of the day. It happened at night. 2:30 in the morning for an hour. Most people would have never have seen it.
Now, as far as deaths and witnesses, here's one other fact here. In at least three other cases, people's beds were hit either by fragments or by exploding shells, but they avoided injury because they'd gone outside to watch the spectacle unfold. A farmer on Vermont Avenue spent hours rounding up his stampeding herd after one of his cows was killed in an explosion. In Inglewood, a family's rabbit hutch was destroyed but caused no serious damage. That's another witness there.
So, but it proves that there could be. I mean, I guess if it was noisy enough people would wake up and go, "Let's go outside and see what's going on."
Which they did.
Yeah, I mean, I would. I guarantee you, I would go outside to see what's going on. No question.
Yeah.
But most of Los Angeles isn't gonna. But it'll be over before they heard about it. They'd hear the noise, wonder what it is, maybe turn on the TV, maybe talk to their neighbors, and by the time they found out about it back then, because you remember, there's not a lot of TV. There was no
TV back then. It was only radio.
There was early TV, but not much at all.
You would have thought it would have been there would be some radio broadcasts about it that still exists.
Possibly, that's possible.
I'd love to hear it.
Interrupted shows with the broadcast. That would be interesting to hear some of those if that's the case. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it's a weather balloon. Whether it's Japanese, some kind of Japanese glowing orange craft, I don't know. It doesn't sound like something the Japanese would be able to build then.
Or take that risk over a crowded city where there's the military nearby.
And you had a great shot. Why didn't you drop a bomb?
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense.
For wartime, it doesn't make any sense at all. So I don't believe the weather balloons, and I don't believe it was Japanese. I think it could be something we just don't understand. It could be UFO, checking things out. I don't know. It's interesting though.
It's always good to still speculate, and maybe somebody has some answers that we don't, and I'd like to hear more if we ever get those answers.
Or if you know anybody who actually was there, whether they're a child and now an adult or older, a senior, we'd love to have them on the show just to talk to them and ask what they thought. What was their experience? What did they think it was? All right.
Okay.
All right. So that's this week's show, and until next week, we'll say goodbye.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Ross Bugden.